Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Joel Makower. Alright, so welcome. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
Sure. I'm Joel Makower. I'm the chairman and co-founder of a company in Oakland, California called GreenBiz Group. We're a media and events company focusing at the intersection of business, technology, and innovation. So we put on some big conferences. We have daily news and newsletters, and we have peer networks for that bring sustainability professionals together to learn from one another on different topics.
hmm So what inspired you to focus your career on like sustainable business, clean technology, and stuff like that?
Well, I just sort of found my way here. I'm a journalist by training, but I've also been an entrepreneur. So I've started three companies in the information and events space. Um, this goes back way back to the late '80s when I was uh, uh, created a book called The Green Consumer Guide that was published actually in 1990, and it was very interesting because I've been writing about business and consumer issues for my career, and then found that I had a weekly syndicated newspaper column in about 90 newspapers about the so-called green consumer movement. Then realized that there really wasn't that much of a consumer movement, but businesses, at least here in the United States, but businesses were grappling with a whole bunch of issues around energy, water, waste, toxics, carbon. And so that's where I've really focused my attention. I started a monthly newsletter in 1991, what you would now call a dead tree snail mail newsletter. And then when the web sort of came into being, I created this website called greenbiz.com. And that's now the centerpiece of about a 70-person company that's, as I said, focusing on events and peer networks.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how do you think misinformation impacts the field of sustainability and clean technology, and what do you think are its like consequences for
Well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of misinformation. I mean, but most of it is, one of the challenges with sustainability is that it's about two things. On the one hand, it's about science and technology and very technical, geeky information. And on
Mhm.
the other hand, it's about our bodies and our families and our communities and our world and our future. So it's really head and heart. And you probably know this, even Annie, that if you go too far in one direction, if you start being too technical, people say, well, that's way over my head. I don't really understand that. And if you start talking about just the feel good stuff, then it's sort of California woo woo, and you lose a lot of people. So we haven't become very good at integrating head and heart in through storytelling, and so that's number one. And number two is people want simple answers, and there's no simple things here. There's a lot of nuances, a lot of things that require a lot of explanation that most people don't have time for.
Mhm.
So when you don't have the information you need, you tend to make up your own story. This is good, or this is bad, or this is authentic, and this is greenwash, or this is the way it is, or this is the way it is over here. And of course, you add to that this polarized society that we're in, and it's very easy to see that just to be, and people don't have time to really dive in and look beyond the basics. So people make up their own stories, or people believe whatever stories they're told, and that's kind of the way it goes.
Mm. Yeah. So then how can businesses and organizations like, I guess, like address misinformation and with like within their own um organizations, like communications, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's hard because companies, first of all, marketing tends to be in. Sorry, there's my dog barking. I'm sorry, I hate to do this. Can we pause for 1 sec? You don't have to pause, but I'm just going to step away.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
sure.
I don't know if you edit these, but I got to just one
No
second.
worries. Mhm.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
It, it, it's really hard, Annie, because first of all, marketing tends to be about absolutes. It's the best, the biggest, the brightest, the cheapest, the coolest. And sustainability is incremental and it's about small improvements. And so it's really hard to rationalize those two because companies want to talk about we're green or we're sustainable or regenerative or organic or whatever the thing is. And the products, usually no company or product is ever perfect. And so you really have to figure that out of how to make that work. Um, and so, so I think companies struggle with this. We just had an event within one of our events. It was called the GreenBiz Comms Summit, where we brought together sustainability professionals with communications professionals and legal professionals, what I call the Bermuda Triangle of sustainability messaging, because messages go in there and they kind of get lost, never to be seen again, because everyone's doing their job. The sustainability people are providing the information to the communications people who tend to put out or want to put out a more grandiose statement. And then the lawyers say, no, you can't say that. And so things get watered down, or maybe saying, this is just too much. This isn't a good message to even be putting out there because, when companies start talking about this stuff, they often become targets.
Hmm.
So, I guess to answer your question, what the public wants to know does the company even understand its impacts? Does it understand, really understand the full impact of what they do and make and sell? And now that they understand it, number two, do they have a plan to address it? And it could be a bold, audacious plan, ideally. It could be 5 or 10 year plan, but do they have a plan and with targets and timetables to show and demonstrate that they're actually making the progress towards the goal that they set for themselves? And then three, are they talking about this stuff openly and authentically, not just waving their arms and saying we're green or whatever term they use, but really bringing the public, their customer along on a journey, saying, we know these problems. This is what we're working on now. We know we've got other work to do, but we're making progress little by little, and we're working towards our goals. And here's what we know, and here's what you should know. I
Hmm.
think companies do that very well, and I think that's sort of the ingredients for success.
Hmm. I see. So, how do you see the role of like social media and technology and like the spread of misinformation, especially or like specifically related to like environmental issues, and what can be done to like counteract that?
Yeah, well, you've sort of answered the question a little bit by saying you need to counteract it. That suggests that social media and some of this technology is not necessarily helpful. Like everything else, technology and social media cut both ways.
Hmm.
They provide a great platform for even small companies to put out messages, and for big companies, everybody to put out messages. And that's the opportunity. The challenge is that those messages are often simplistic, or in some cases just plain wrong, and it also gets lost in the sort of the cacophony, the just the noise out there around of everybody talking about everything, depending
Hmm.
on what's going on. Um, you know, I don't think anybody's figured out the answer to your question, Annie, in terms of how you really communicate well and how you use social media. Except I think customers want to have a conversation with a company. They just don't want to be talked at. They
Hmm.
want to um, they want to be able to talk back and ask questions and give feedback, and they want companies to be honest and, as I said before, authentic in those answers, including admitting to things that they're not yet doing right, or the progress they've yet to make. And so to the extent that whether it's social media or just any form of media, to have a conversation, a real honest conversation with customers, um, I think is one key to success. and really listen to them. And that's of course what you should do in a conversation, and not just talk, but listen as well.
Mm,
And I don't know that companies have done that very well. They tend to have a point of view that they're trying to get out there, and it's usually a positive spin on something that's maybe less than perfect. But they don't necessarily listen well, and I think companies need to do that better to hear what consumers or customers' concerns really are, and
mm,
what their expectations of those companies are as well.
mhm. Yeah. So, um, what are some like, I guess, barriers to achieving like widespread like adoption of sustainable like practices and like clean technologies? And I guess to tie that around like misinformation, how can misinformation be like overcome in this process, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I'll take the second part of that first. They're both big questions. I mean, misinformation just has to be, you can't always just fight misinformation with more information, because it really depends on who has the bigger megaphone. Sometimes you don't want to fight it at all, just because it's such a distraction, and takes you off of the journey that you're dealing with. But I don't know that I have a good answer to that question. The first part of the question is, what are the biggest barriers? Well, there's a bunch of them, but in a word, change. Change is hard, whether it's for individuals, for you and me, or for big institutions, or communities, or any pick your scale. Um, we all like the idea of change. We all love the noun of change, the idea of it, but the verb actually changing
Mm-hmm.
is kind of harder for a lot of people. So figuring out so if you look at just on the company side, how do companies change? Well, they change little by little, incrementally. Of course, we want them to change much further, much faster. So we get impatient and we call little incremental change greenwash, because we think it's not enough. And it
Mm-hmm.
isn't enough, but it is how companies change. And individuals, change only to the extent that there's some version of better. So I'll buy this product over that one if it's better, which could mean cheaper to buy, cheaper to operate, longer lasting, higher quality, locally sourced, better for my family, uh, uh, cooler for my image. Depending on what you're buying, whether it's a cosmetics or computers or a car, or clothing. It's all going to be different. But I don't think, you know, we're not willing to change, and I don't know that we should be changing just for the sake of it's the right thing to do. I mean, we should maybe as humans, but we don't. And so, people are just resistant to change their ways. And it's sort of funny, because think how much we've changed just in your lifetime, Annie, certainly in mine. I mean, this thing right here, you know, I mean, that's just totally changed so much of what we do and how we operate.
Mm-hmm.
We now have these computers that are more powerful than the computers that went to the moon in the 60s. They were on those spaceships, that are carrying around in our pockets, that can access information, and all the things that a phone can do. We've changed so many things that we do. I mean, the fact that you and I are talking over Zoom right now
Mm-hmm.
is hugely different than what we would have done even 2 or 3 or certainly 4 years ago. So we change all the time. So we're not resistant to change when something is better or more convenient or gives us some new capability or opportunity. But that's often not the case with products. And again, whether it's a B2B, a business to business product, or a B2C selling to consumers, they're not always better, and they require changes that we're not willing to make. So that's the biggest challenge I think companies have to overcome, whether they're changing themselves and getting their employees, and particularly middle management, which is pretty adept at blocking change. It's whether it's internal change, or it's getting their customers to change, or changing their suppliers, or changing any number of things. It's just hard for us humans to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, So those are all my questions about misinformation. So just for fun, what inspires you in life, I guess? Like, is there like a book, person, idea? Uh, yeah.
What inspires me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, lots of things. One of the things I love about this field, and I've been in this field for like 35 years, is that I'm inspired all the time. Um, I think one of the things that most inspires me right now is you and your cohort of young people who are coming into this space much earlier than I did in my life, and realizing that this is an important and existential threat to their future, and really leaning into some of these topics and understanding them at a level that even a lot of my peers don't understand, and starting movements, nonprofits, small businesses, even while still in high school and college, and then ultimately starting to work for companies and becoming change agents in those companies. We have a nonprofit spinoff, a part of the GreenBiz group, part of my for-profit company. We have a nonprofit. It's called greenbiz.org, where we specifically try to, our goal is to help bring more young people of color into the sustainability profession. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, we give scholarships to 10 young people of color to come to our events. We do 4 big in person events a year, and we pay for their airfare and their hotel, as well as obviously the registration fees. And we give them an experience, and then we connect them to all the other, we call them emerging leaders, and and so they can learn from one another, and then we connect them to corporate people, older people inside companies who can help mentor them as well. So that's really inspirational, and then I'm inspired by the amount of innovation that's coming into this space. There's been innovation for a long time, but it's really starting to ramp up, and we in addressing some of the newer, bigger challenges like the circular economy. How do we turn waste back into raw materials or products? How do we keep materials flowing within the circles of business and use? How do we redesign our world so that things flow circularly and not just linearly? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the climate tech. How do we really some of the things that are very well known, like electric vehicles and solar and wind, but how do we create new versions of cement and steel that are not carbon intensive,
Mm-hmm.
the building blocks literally of our society? How do we create agriculture and livestock and food in a way that doesn't, as I like to say, bite the land that feeds us? How do we create and is kinder and gentler, not just to people and the planet, but also to the animals themselves?
Mm-hmm.
How do we, reinventing farming? How do we relocalize commerce so that materials stay within local areas? I mean, how do we, we're in the process now of reinventing our world, how we power it, how we live, travel, work, play, how we just how we eat. And so those are massive opportunities. And there is going to be just, I think, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, certainly for the rest of my life and for much of yours, Annie, this great renaissance of reinventing so much of what we do, that I think it's really, really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And last question, do you have any advice for people, especially like young people, teens, um about anything like sustainability, like information, or just like general like life advice?
Life. Well, how many hours do you want to talk? No, I think I get a lot of calls from people, whether they're young people in high school or in college, or sometimes mid-career people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who want to, get into sustainability. They don't always know what that means, but they know they want to be part of these solutions, and they think that this is an important and maybe cool thing to do. Um, and they want to know, what do I do? What do I study? What do I, how do I do this? And I say, well, first of all, it's good to learn about sustainability. That's helpful, but it's really, I think, more important to learn something. If you want to go into business and sustainable business, learn about finance, learn about supply chains or marketing or operations or human resources or some other aspect of business, and then bring your sustainability interest to
Hmm.
that job, as opposed, because there aren't that many jobs that are just in sustainability of itself. It's increased. There used to be, and there's still some, but increasingly it's getting pushed out into the different parts of business operations. And it's true also if you're going to work for a nonprofit or start a company or something, sustainability, bring that sustainability lens to whatever you're doing, but also, do something that's in the mainstream in terms of your career choice or your business idea or something else. So, I mean, there's lots of other advice out there. I'm happy to, to bring you some of it, but that's I think the number one thing for people who want to be a part of, I think, these sustainability solutions.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for this opportunity and for your time and for the work you're doing. And it was really fun talking to you and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Annie, for the great work you're doing. And, feel free to check out greenbiz.com, and there's some free newsletters and things you can get. So it's there for the taking. Check it out.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
You too.